Should zoos be forced to release captive big cats back into the wild, even if they'll likely die, is a debate that raises ethical, ecological, and conservation-related dilemmas. Zoos have long argued that captive big cats serve an educational, scientific, and conservation purpose, helping to raise awareness and fund wildlife protection efforts. However, many critics believe that keeping big cats in captivity for entertainment or research is unnatural, cruel, and morally unjustifiable. With growing awareness of animal intelligence, emotional depth, and natural behaviors, many people now question whether zoos should be forced to release big cats back into the wild. Some activists argue that releasing big cats, even if they struggle to survive, is better than keeping them in artificial enclosures for life. Wild tigers, lions, leopards, and jaguars rely on hunting skills, territorial instincts, and social structures that are difficult to develop in captivity. Most captive big cats are born and raised in controlled environments, meaning they lack survival skills, fear of humans, and experience hunting live prey. Releasing them into the wild without proper training could lead to starvation, territorial conflicts, or even being killed by other predators. Some conservationists argue that forcing zoos to release big cats without proper rehabilitation would be irresponsible and unethical. Wild ecosystems are already under extreme pressure from habitat loss, poaching, and human expansion, making it difficult for reintroduced predators to find safe territory. Many big cats in captivity have been bred for generations in zoos, meaning their genetics may be too weak or domesticated for survival in the wild. Captive-bred lions, for example, often lack the muscle mass, endurance, and hunting precision needed to compete with wild-born individuals. Tigers raised in enclosures may fail to recognize dangerous situations, making them vulnerable to other predators, poachers, or even conflicts with humans. Releasing a big cat into the wild does not guarantee freedom. It could result in a slow, painful death from starvation, injury, or human retaliation. Conservationists argue that a structured rewilding program is necessary before any captive big cat can be safely introduced into a wild ecosystem. Some successful rehabilitation programs exist, such as rewilding projects in South Africa, where captive lions and cheetahs are trained to hunt before release. However, even in the best cases, reintroducing big cats is a long, expensive process requiring large protected areas and careful monitoring. Zoos that hold big cats often claim they are helping conservation efforts, but many critics argue that these efforts are profit-driven rather than focused on species recovery. Some zoos and private facilities keep big cats in small enclosures with little enrichment, failing to meet even basic welfare standards. If zoos were forced to release their captive big cats, where would they go, and who would be responsible for their survival? Many national parks and wildlife reserves are already struggling to protect wild big cat populations from poaching, habitat destruction, and human-wildlife conflict. If reintroduced big cats fail to integrate, they may turn to livestock or human settlements for food, increasing the risk of conflict. In regions like India and Africa, human-wildlife conflict is already a major issue, with farmers retaliating against big cats that attack livestock. Zoos argue that some captive big cats have health problems, genetic defects, or behavioral issues that make them completely unfit for survival in the wild. For example, white tigers, often bred for zoos, suffer from genetic deformities due to inbreeding and would not survive in the wild. Rather than forcing zoos to release big cats, some experts propose creating semi-wild sanctuaries where captive animals can live in more natural environments. Wildlife sanctuaries allow big cats to experience freedom without the immediate dangers of poaching, starvation, or territorial fights. However, sanctuaries require significant funding, large tracts of land, and long-term management, making them difficult to establish at scale. The best-case scenario would involve rehabilitating captive big cats over time, teaching them to hunt and avoid human settlements before release. Some argue that zoos should transition away from breeding big cats for captivity and focus on supporting wild populations through habitat protection. If zoos continue keeping big cats, should they be required to prove their animals serve an actual conservation purpose rather than just entertainment? Big cat species like tigers, cheetahs, and leopards are critically endangered, and some argue that captive populations could serve as a genetic safety net. However, genetic diversity is often compromised in captive breeding programs, meaning reintroduced individuals may not be ideal candidates for wild populations. Some conservationists suggest that zoos shift their focus to rescuing big cats from the illegal pet trade, circuses, and canned hunting facilities. Many big cats in captivity were born into inhumane conditions, and simply releasing them would not undo years of psychological trauma or dependence on humans. Instead of releasing all captive big cats, zoos should be required to fund conservation projects that protect wild habitats and prevent further species decline. Forcing zoos to release their big cats may not be the best solution, but holding them accountable for ethical animal welfare practices should be mandatory. The debate ultimately comes down to whether captivity is ever justifiable, or if keeping big cats in zoos is an outdated concept. If zoos cannot provide large, enriched, and ethical enclosures for big cats, should they be allowed to keep them at all? Conservationists argue that the priority should be protecting wild big cat populations, not maintaining artificial zoo environments that do little to help species survival. While some captive big cats may never be fit for the wild, future generations of big cats deserve to live free, not behind bars for human amusement. The best way forward is a transition from captivity-based conservation to habitat-focused conservation, ensuring big cats can thrive where they truly belong. The real question is not just whether captive big cats should be released, but whether zoos should continue breeding them if the wild is no longer an option.